The last thing I expected on a morning I was about to pitch a $50 million solution was to be publicly shamed for my pants. You'll need to go home and change, Anna. Jeans aren't appropriate for this office, Mr. Henderson declared, his voice soaked in smugness, one palm resting dramatically on the company handbook, like he was about to swear me into corporate purgatory. Never mind that they were dark wash pressed, frankly nice in the wrinkled khakis he wore every goddamn day. No, this wasn't about denim. This was about control. A message. A well-timed corporate kick to the ribs right before I presented the module I'd spent the last 4 months perfecting. I stood there, clutching my tablet, my code glowing on the screen like a loaded weapon I wasn't allowed to use. The conference room door closed behind me with the finality of a guillotine. I didn't argue, didn't storm out. I smiled, nodded, walked the sterile gray hallway of Sterling Solutions like a condemned woman already planning her jailbreak. Oh, and by the way, since 97% of you are listening without subscribing, maybe hit that little button. Toss a like, too, if you're feeling frisky. It really keeps the caffeine flowing for our sleep-deprived editing crew. We like feeding the algorithm just slightly more than we like feeding ourselves. Anyway, didn't go home. I walked straight past the elevator and out into the hot slap of Ohio July. Took a hard left to Grounded Coffee down the street. Sat in my usual booth and texted Maya one word, go time. She replied with a gif of a rocket launch and then immediately FaceTimed me, her curls a frizzy halo of chaos. Wait, go time as in now? Now! Effective immediately. I said, logging into the secure repo we've been building on nights and weekends, always one NDA away from a lawsuit. But it was ours. Every line of code, every UI sketch, every bug we had stomped with midnight Red Bulls and curse words, it was all sitting in the cloud, waiting to come alive. I registered Aura Connect LLC on my phone between bites of an everything bagel, transferred the final iteration of the prototype to our private servers, scheduled a wipe of my Sterling-issued laptop for midnight, then wrote the most satisfying resignation letter I've ever seen. Professional, clinical, and cold enough to frost over hell. I said auto-send at 10:03 a.m., 3 minutes into the meeting I was supposed to lead. The email subject line, standard deviation. Maya snorted when she saw it. Petty, I love it. I was halfway through wiring our freelance designer in advance when my personal inbox pinged, a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Grant Stahn, former boss turned venture capitalist. His subject line, still building something world-changing? Attached was a calendar invite for coffee the following week. I hadn't replied before. This time, I didn't hesitate. And then, because corporate pettiness is an ecosystem all its own, I checked the Sterling Slack channel I still had access to and saw Henderson had already posted the project update. My slide deck, my diagrams, his initials in the file name. We have standards, he'd said. Yeah, I've got one now. 2. It's called a standard for revenge. By noon, I cracked open my third espresso and was sweating through my blazer like a fugitive on a Greyhound bus. Maya was already pinging me links to low-rent co-working spaces and asking if we could afford Post-its and power strips. I told her no. We'd have to pick one and barter for the other. Like it was a goddamn Oregon Trail. Resignation email hit Henderson's inbox with all the subtlety of a drone strike. Time-stamped, legally bulletproof, and CC'd to HR, legal, and one intern who had once brought me a cookie when I worked through lunch. No response, just a Slack message from a former team lead. Holy shit, did you really just resign during the pitch? Yes, Jason. Yes, I did. Broke up with corporate America in the middle of a Zoom call and didn't even mute myself first. Maya and I had talked about starting Aura Connect for years, but always in the safe, fantasy movie way you talk about quitting your job and moving to Iceland. Now, it was no longer hypothetical. It was happening right here, between a flickering Edison bulb and a barista named Cody who looked like he wept upon Ever on purpose. Opened our GitHub vault and made it real. The repo changed from personal projects to Aura Connect Prod. I transferred the code base, encrypted our dev notes, and stripped every last piece of metadata that might point back to Sterling. Our baby had officially moved out of the basement. That's when the fear punched me in the throat. No salary, no benefits, no tech support team to blame when the servers crash. Just me, Maya, a UX designer with a caffeine addiction and a business registration certificate I downloaded off LegalZoom. I stared at the blinking cursor in a new browser tab. The venture capitalist invite from Grant still sat there like a loaded gun in a glove box. I hadn't RSVP'd for weeks because I assumed it would lead to disappointment. Like every other time, I put myself out there with a half-baked pitch and walked away with nothing but a warm latte and a pity follow on LinkedIn. But now, screw it. I clicked accept and picked the earliest slot. I didn't need money yet. I needed access, information, connections. If Grant could get me 5 minutes in front of someone at Innovate Dynamics, I'd figure out the rest. By 3 p.m., we'd built a task board with exactly 41 items, 17 of which involved convincing people to work for us without paying them. I texted our designer, Ravi, who owed me 3 favors and a kidney for a UI overhaul on the home screen, and promised him equity we hadn't even legally authorized yet. He replied, "How soon do you need it?" Yesterday. I said, the reality of it all was like a freight train of adrenaline barreling down a very unstable track. Everyone felt like stealing fire from the gods. Every minute that passed without a call from Sterling's legal team felt like getting away with murder. But I knew the real test was still coming. Henderson wasn't going to sit on his hands. He was going to play nice until he didn't. And that Innovate Dynamics contract that was still in play, I wasn't just building a startup. I was entering a race where my opponent had a full tank of gas, a map, and a head start. And I was barefoot, blindfolded, using a slingshot I built in the parking lot. But I had one thing they didn't: desperation with a Wi-Fi connection. Grant looked exactly the same, like a Patagonia vest had gained sentience and learned how to talk down to billionaires. We met at a place called Press and Pour, the kind of cafe where the menu was written in chalk and nobody knew how to make coffee without also performing an interpretive dance. He gave me the once-over as I walked in, probably noting the jeans with a knowing smirk. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said, setting down a tiny glass of what might have been either cold brew or experimental jet fuel. "Didn't think I'd have a reason to." I shot back, sliding into the seat across from him. Then someone tried to bury me in a dress code violation. And now here we are. We did the polite tango. "How have you been?" Quick brag reel. Casual mention of a series B round he was closing. Waited for me to pitch. I didn't. "I'm not here for money, Grant," I said, cutting through the banter. "I need a name. Specifically, someone at Innovate Dynamics. Anyone who can get my product in front of Albright." His eyebrow twitched like I'd asked for nuclear launch codes. "You know, they're in bed with Sterling, right?" "I know they think they are," I said, pulling out my iPad and flipping it toward him. "But I also know Sterling doesn't even understand what Albright actually wants. They're going to give her a 50-slide proposal with 2 fonts, 3 buzzwords, and 0 soul." He studied the screen, then looked back at me with something that almost resembled respect. "You're not trying to compete on specs. I'm trying to compete on truth, speed, customization, and rage, if we're being honest." He chuckled. "You're either about to change the game or flame out spectacularly." "I like that." Then he leaned in, his voice dropping a notch. "I had lunch with Albright 2 weeks ago. Off the record, she's pissed, sick of vendors pitching dreams with PowerPoint. She told me, and I quote, 'I want someone to show me they get it. No frills. Just saw the damn thing.' My brain lit up like a slot machine on tilt. 'What thing?' I asked, already knowing the answer. She mentioned this odd little data segmentation issue no one's been able to crack. She brought up at a panel last quarter and got blank stares from 5 CEOs. I blinked. I'd been at that panel. I'd sat in the back row while Henderson doodled in his notes and whispered that it was too niche to matter. But it did matter, and I had already sketched out a workaround for it 6 months ago because I actually care, because I listened, because I'm not some necktie with a title. Grant leaned back and sipped his whatever the hell. "She hates proposals. You show her something that works, you might just skip the line." I didn't finish my drink. I didn't even pretend to finish it. I stood, shook his hand, and thanked him with the kind of grin you flash right before pulling the pin on a grenade. As I walked out, I opened Slack and DM'd Maya. "We're not building for the pitch. We're building for the Queen. She replied with a single gif of Michelle Yeoh doing a roundhouse kick. The game had changed. Sterling would spend the next 2 weeks preparing binders and buzzwords. We were about to deliver fire in a bottle. No meetings, no fluff. Just one woman in jeans and a grudge, solving a problem her boss didn't even bother to understand. Maya's garage smelled like ambition and burnt cheese. There were extension cords running like jungle vines across the floor, a whiteboard propped against a lawn chair, and somewhere under the chaos, I'm pretty sure Raccoon had set up its own startup. We were knee-deep in what I later dubbed the 7 days of beautiful hell. We weren't building a product. We were handcrafting a middle finger in the form of software. Every decision we made asked one question. Will this make Albright say finally instead of ugh when she opens it? Our UX guy, Ravi, lived in Berlin and operated on vampire hours. We promised him 3% equity, our undying loyalty, and a hoodie once it could afford merch. He accepted without reading the fine print, mostly because Maya called him the kind of favor that probably came from covering up a minor felony in college. Ravi delivered like a man possessed. Smooth interface, zero bloat, and a landing screen that made me want to kiss my own app. It was lean, snappy, and custom-built for the exact use case Albright had ranted about while tech bros blinked at her like confused Labradors. Meanwhile, I was sleeping in 90-minute bursts on a beanbag shaped like a dolphin and eating so many pepperoni slices, I started hallucinating code in marinara. Maya's Fitbit thought she'd join a cult. Then the email hit my inbox. Subject, your recent departure from Sterling Solutions. Body, Anna, while we respect your decision, we must note that leaving during an internal client presentation without prior notice or transition documentation reflects poorly on your professional record. We will be marking your file accordingly. Mark away, I thought, staring at the screen like it owed me money. I almost replied with a photo of our prototype running flawlessly on 3 devices at once, but I decided to be more productive. I coded until my fingers cramped. I demoed it for Maya while we microwaved pizza bagels and used my resignation email as a coaster. Channeled the insult into every line of logic I wrote, every dynamic data hook, every UI animation, every single feature that Sterling would never in a million years prioritize because it wasn't on a slide deck. And then Friday afternoon, I got a text from Asia, one of the only people at Sterling who still spoke to me post-affection. Henderson's demo crashed 3 times. He's yelling at the devs like it's their fault, patching the prototype with duct tape and denial. Also, rumor is Forbes is working on a disruptor feature. Some startup stuff. Female founders. That kind of angle. I read it twice. Then I just sat there, legs crossed under Maya's ping-pong table, stunned into silence. Sterling was fumbling. The client was open to disruption. And the press was sniffing around for a story that looked suspiciously like mine. I texted Asia back one word. Timing. She replied. Sterling's final pitch to Albright is in 2 weeks, which meant we had less than half that to make our move. I turned to Maya. It's not just about winning the contract anymore. It's about controlling the story. She raised an eyebrow. You mean like a product narrative? No, I said, grinning like a lunatic. I mean a Forbes cover. We pulled up our old media contact spreadsheet, one we built back when we still thought PR firms cared about nobodies. I found the name of a junior journalist who once liked my LinkedIn post about UI accessibility. Maya dug up Grant's old intro email. And somewhere between refactoring a data stream and replacing a broken spacebar with an external keyboard we jerry-rigged out of Best Buy return pile, we started pitching a story. Not just about tech, about grit, about how a woman got sent home for wearing jeans and came back with a product that could eat her former employer alive. Sterling had bureaucracy. We had caffeine, code, and a countdown. Let the war begin. His name was Kevin Runn, mid-30s, Stanford MBA, profile pic wearing a fleece vest and holding a reusable cup like it was a brand partnership. Junior innovation strategist at Innovate Dynamics, a title that screamed, let's circle back after Q4. But his LinkedIn said he'd worked under Albright for 2 years. That meant access. I didn't send a cold email. I like subtlety better. I commented on one of his posts about digital ethics, messaged him a thoughtful, totally agree, with a quote from a book he probably hadn't read, and waited. 2 hours later, he replied with thumbs up and asked if I was in the space. I said I was working on something disruptive. 3 DMs later, I had a coffee meeting set up for Wednesday at 11:30 in a boutique cafe that served espresso in science beakers and charged extra for oat milk. It was the kind of place that smelled like old wood and startup sweat. He arrived wearing Allbirds and that tight, polite expression of someone who thought this would be a waste of time, but came anyway because he might get a LinkedIn story out of it. I didn't pitch. I didn't even talk much. I waited until a second sip of whatever overpriced pour-over he ordered, then pulled out my tablet. "This is live," I said, handing it to him. "It addresses the data segmentation friction point Albright flagged at the April conference." He scrolled, paused, scrolled again, then tapped. "This actually works," he said, surprise leaking into his voice like air from a tire. "How?" I shrugged. "We don't have meetings. We have code." He stared at the prototype like it had insulted his entire product team. "We've had Sterling in the loop for 3 months, and they still don't understand what the problem is, let alone how to solve it." I kept my tone breezy. "All I ask is, if you think this is merit, show someone who matters. I'm not looking for handshakes, just eyes on the solution." He looked at me, thoughtful now. "Less startup-y gimmick, more potential asset. I'll make sure this gets seen by the right person." Bingo! I left him with a tablet and a branded USB drive that definitely didn't have a tracking beacon embedded. Probably back in Maya's rusting Civic. I exhaled like I just finished a hostage negotiation. My hands were shaking, but I texted her, "Got a crack in the dam." While she replied with celebratory flame emojis, I pulled up my email and opened a blank draft to Jordan Mendez, junior tech reporter at Forbes, who once wrote a 4,000-word article on blockchain for veterinarians and was clearly hungry for a real story. Subject line: "You don't know me, but Grant Ston does." Body: "Hi Jordan, my name's Anna Cho. I'm building a company that went from what if to launch in less than 3 weeks because of a very public humiliation that accidentally kicked off the most important week of my career. I can't share much yet, but if you're curious, I'll be available next week with proof in hand. Off the record, for now. Let me know, AC." The reply came 5 hours later. "Now, this sounds like a story. Let's set something up." I read it twice, then 3 times, like I couldn't believe someone was finally asking about me. The pieces were on the board now. Innovate Dynamics had a prototype. Forbes had a scent. Henderson had a looming disaster dressed in bullet points and wishful thinking. I leaned back in the seat, the Civic's AC sputtering warm air against my face, and let myself smile for the first time in days. I hadn't won yet, but for the first time, I wasn't playing catch-up. I was setting the pace. The email came in at 7:42 a.m. on a Monday, buried between a failed build alert and a spammy invite to a Founders of Faith breakfast I'm 99% sure was trying to invert me via gluten-free scones. Subject: presentation request, Innovate Dynamics from Office of C. Albright. Body: "Ms. Albright has reviewed your prototype. She would like a formal walkthrough this Thursday at 2 p.m. You will have 45 minutes. Presentation materials not required in advance. Location and access credentials to follow." I reread it 5 times, then screamed so loud Maya thought I'd fried the database. "She wants a presentation," I said, pacing in tight circles in our glorified shoebox in the office, while Ravi, blurry-eyed from his 4th all-nighter, muttered something about dying happy now. 2 days. I had 48 hours to compress every ounce of thought, sweat, and vengeance into a pitch for the woman who didn't want frills, just solutions. I started shaking. It wasn't fear. Not entirely. It was a weight of everything. Every condescending meeting. Every time someone called me detail-oriented like it was an insult. Every smug, "That's not how we do things here," from a guy with a flip phone and a golf calendar. She was giving me a chance. 1 shot. And Sterling? They weren't even scheduled until the following week. We cut the line. The universe cracked open a second time at noon when Jordan Mendez emailed to confirm our Forbes interview the day after the pitch. Now I had 2 back-to-back gut checks lined up like some karmic American ninja warrior course. impress a CEO who hates corporate theater, then sell the story of how I got here to the biggest tech outlet in the country. We shut the office for everything except prep. Ravi prepped a new build with zero-lag load speeds and an onboarding flow so intuitive it practically read minds. Maya drilled me with mock questions so brutal, I started sweating when she looked at me sideways. We tore apart our original deck, slashed anything that smelled like buzzword salad, and rebuilt the story from scratch. Not just what we built, but why. A product forged out of humiliation and rage. Tailored not to chase enterprise trends, but to solve the damn problem exactly how Albright had begged for. By Tuesday night, we were running on fumes and vending machine pretzels, and I still hadn't figured out what the hell I was going to wear. That answer came during a prep call with Albright's assistant, a woman with the voice of someone who didn't suffer fools or miss calendar invites. After we confirmed tech specs and timing, she added, almost offhand, Miss Albright appreciates punctuality and, let's say, practical attire. We've had a few overdressed peacocks lately. I stared at the screen for a beat. Maya smirked from across the room. You're wearing the jeans, aren't you? You're damn right I'm wearing the jeans. They had become more than pants. They were the battle flag, the line in the sand, the symbol of everything Henderson tried to reduce me to and everything I refused to let die in that conference room. Thursday was coming fast. The pitch, the interview, the reckoning. And I wasn't walking in as someone begging to be noticed. I was walking in as the answer they'd been looking for. The elevator ride to the 27th floor felt like the final ascent of a roller coaster, the kind where you can hear the clinks of the chain and your own heartbeat fighting for dominance. Maya gave my shoulder a squeeze as the doors opened. Don't forget to breathe. Breathing's for people not about to nuke a Fortune 500 contract from inside a blazer and denim. We stepped into the glass and steel cathedral that was Innovate Dynamics HQ. The receptionist, who looked like she moonlighted as an AI model, directed us to conference room Orion. Real subtle tech overlords. Albright was already there when we walked in. She didn't stand, didn't smile, just nodded once, slow and assessing. Her team flanked her like generals buttoned up, tablet tapping, resting disapproval face types. I'd spent so long imagining this moment that it felt weirdly small. Just a room, just a table, just people. But I didn't come to be small. I came in wearing the same pair of jeans Henderson exiled me for. The same ones that carried every line of code, every missed birthday, every Red Bull headache, every no that led to this. Topped with a sharp charcoal blazer and a clean white shirt. I didn't look like rebellion. I looked like inevitability. Albright gestured to begin. No small talk, no slide deck. I pulled out my tablet, mirrored it to the screen, and started walking them through the prototype. Not a pitch, not a sales monologue, a story. I told them how it started. A throwaway line at a tech panel that no one listened to except me. I told them how that problem had haunted me because it was real. How I built a solution that didn't rely on 10-month onboarding cycles or 17 compliance reviews. I showed them live data, real-time responsiveness, a stripped-down interface designed for utility, not branding. Then I said it plainly. Sterling will offer you a prettier presentation. They'll promise a team of a dozen consultants in 6 months to launch. We built this in 21 days from the ground up. No meetings, no silos, just engineers and fire. One of the suits asked about scalability. I answered before he finished the question. Another asked about security protocols. Maya jumped in with a precision answer that would have made an auditor weep with joy. But Albright, she barely looked at the screen. She watched me, and when it was over, when the last frame of our demo faded out and the room fell into that awkward post-performance silence, she said just one thing. If we sign with you, who's my point of contact? I didn't blink, didn't pause. You're looking at her. Albright smiled, just barely, just enough. The rest of the meeting was formality. We shook hands, exchanged cards, got the classic. We'll be in touch soon. I knew I'd nailed it. I didn't need their confirmation because I didn't just show them a solution. I showed them that I was the opposite of what they hated about big vendors. I was the answer to their fatigue, wearing the pants that corporate America tried to shame me for. Back in the elevator, Maya was practically vibrating. Holy shit, Anna, you crushed it. I nodded. Not smug, just settled. I think we just killed a dinosaur. Now, all we had to do was survive the next 24 hours before Forbes knocked on the door and asked him to explain how the extinction happened. The email hit my inbox at 6:18 a.m. with the subject line, "Contract executed." I stared at it for a full minute, mouth open, coffee forgotten. I opened the PDF, and there it was in all its sans serif glory. A multi-million-dollar contract from Innovate Dynamics, signed, sealed, and countersigned with a tidy digital signature from C. Albright herself. The number at the bottom made my stomach flip. It was bigger than we'd pitched, bigger than I'd even let myself imagine. Albright didn't just say yes. She bet heavy. I burst into Maya's room like a caffeinated banshee, waving the phone. She signed. She signed. Maya blinked from under a blanket, like she couldn't tell if this was real life or a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation and too many Cheetos. Then she screamed, too. Then we both screamed. The neighbors probably thought someone died. Someone did, just not the way they thought. By 9:30, I was walking into Forbes' building with the kind of calm you earn after surviving a 3-week business crucible. I wore the jeans again, this time with a crisp button down, sleeves rolled, and a face that said, "Ask me what I just did. Go on." Jordan Mendez met me in the lobby, wiry, over-caffeinated, and vibrating with journalist energy. I've been dying to hear the full thing. Let's go. They brought me to a studio-style room with cameras I pretended not to notice, and a couch that looked like it belonged in a startup founder's divorce. So, Jordan said, cracking open a notebook, "Walk me through it. Start from the beginning." So I did. I told him about Sterling Solutions, about the beige walls and the beige meetings and the beige expectations. I told him about Henderson, the condescension, the quiet theft of credit, the Friday where my jeans became a corporate sin. I told him about the garage, the pizza, the prototype, the race against a dinosaur. I didn't cry. I didn't soften the edges. I told it straight. The rage wasn't fresh anymore. It was forged into something stronger, something precise, something like pride. Jordan just listened, barely wrote. The recorder did all the work. When I showed them the signed contract on my phone, they let out a low whistle. "You took Sterling's contract. In 3 weeks." I nodded. "You realize this isn't just a founder story. It's a revenge story." "I know," I said. "That's what makes it honest." Jordan leaned forward. "We're going to run this hard. Probably a feature. Front page of digital, possibly print, depending on the layout." Then came the question. "We need a great photo for the cover. What do you have in mind?" I grinned, already seeing it in my head. "I want it in the garage by the server rack. Me in the jeans. Blazer optional." Jordan lit up, poetic and brutal. "Exactly," I said, because the revenge wasn't about screaming. It wasn't about rubbing their faces in it. It was about showing up in the same pants they sent me home for and proving they were wrong about everything. 3 weeks to the hour after Henderson told me to go home and dress like a professional, I woke up to find my face staring back at me from a magazine rack in the checkout line of a CVS. There I was, leaning against Maya's janky old server rack, blazer slightly wrinkled, jeans unapologetic, laptop in hand with the Aura Connect logo glowing like a middle finger dressed in HTML. The headline wrapped it all in a bow. "Dress for Success. How Anna's Aura Connect snatched a $50 million contract in 21 days." I bought 3 copies, not because I needed them, but because it felt like stealing home plate with both middle fingers in the air. I left one on a park bench just to spread the gospel. By 10 a.m., the article was viral. LinkedIn, Twitter, Slack threads I still had ghost access to. My phone lit up like it owed me a favor. Messages from college professors, old clients, a cousin I hadn't heard from since she tried to sell me essential oils. All saying the same thing. "You did it." But the one that hit me like a shot of espresso to the soul came from Asia, the only real friend I had left behind at Sterling. First text, an image. It was Henderson, standing in the Sterling Solutions break room, holding my Forbes cover, his mouth slack, his tie crooked. He looked like someone had just informed him that God wasn't real, and also his car had been keyed. Second text. He canceled the all hands. Floor silent. HR's pretending they can't read. I'm pretty sure someone slow clapped. I stare at the photo, at the man who sent me home for denim, while he pitched my work to a client. He never understood. The man who told me I didn't belong in the room. Now holding the proof that I didn't just belong, I ran the damn room. I didn't reply. Nothing needed to be said. I was sitting in our new office, modest, sunlit, smelling faintly of paint and takeout. No receptionist, no glass walls, just desks, cables, and the faint hum of our first real server stack coming to life. Maya walked in holding 2 coffees and a look that said, "You're going to want to see this." But I already knew. We didn't celebrate. We didn't scream. We just nodded. Because this was never about fireworks. It was about the quiet, perfect symmetry of it all. The insult, the exile, the comeback. I looked out the window, city sprawling beyond the glass. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I was building. And the ruins behind me, they could keep their dress code. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch flicking drama.